On Sunday, just days into the Trump-brokered ceasefire, 2 Israeli soldiers were killed in Rafah after Hamas fighters fired an RPG at an IDF engineering vehicle, a clear violation of the deal. The IDF, based on intelligence, clearly blamed Hamas and launched a wave of intense strikes across Gaza in response. Within hours in D.C., Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff scrambled to get to Israel, trying to hold the ceasefire together. And then, in a move that stunned many Israelis and many non-Israelis, President Trump said publicly that he didn't believe the Hamas leadership was behind the attack, calling it instead the work of rogue elements. Is this a sign that Israel is going to be forced to keep this deal alive no matter what? And at what point will we know whether it's about to crash or create a new reality we've never seen before? To help me unpack this today, I'm joined by returning guest Amiad Cohen, CEO of the Israel Liberty Center, known in Hebrew as Hamerkaz Lecherut Israelit. Amiad is one of Israel's leading strategic thinkers, and over the course of an almost 1-hour podcast, Amiad dove into where we are with this ceasefire agreement. He held nothing back, as you're about to hear, and he gave a stark reality of where he thinks we're holding today. However, I want you to hang on to the last part of this podcast. Amiad offered a fascinating rebuilding of Israel and where we need to be in the future so that the next war that Israel faces, we win, and we win based on Israel's interests. So hang on, let's reveal what Israel's strategy is going forward. Amiad, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you for having me again.
Since we've seen you, I think you've been in Syria, in many other places around the globe. So thank you for making the time for True East. Today, we want to bring you into Gaza. Can you give us, before anything, Amiad, a brief of where the ceasefire is holding right now before we dive inside?
So I'll start from the controversial statement by President Trump yesterday, which was actually accurate. The Hamas operatives in Rafah is under Israeli control today, and Israeli IDF soldiers went to find some 50 to 100 Hamas operatives that are still hiding in Rafah, in Rafah, and they tried to attack them, and they just had a battle. So he was accurate in that aspect. In the meantime, the ceasefire today is stable. In the meantime, the IDF is surrounded. The small perimeter of Hamas that is still stable inside the city of Gaza and the central camps. And Hamas is 1-2 dead hostages a day, giving back the bodies of the hostages. And it seems like it's going to be stable. And there are now teams of negotiations in Egypt, Israeli, Hamas, Qatar, Turkey, and obviously the United States overseeing everything in negotiations, trying to drill down to the details how the ceasefire will look like in the next couple of months, obviously, but they're trying to plan something much longer than that.
You know, we've had ceasefires before throughout the last 2 years. I don't know, there's been a bunch of ceasefires. There's been attempts at ceasefires, but this one is different. This is a ceasefire under the guidance of President Trump, the most powerful leader of any nation in the world. Do you see this ceasefire holding over the long run?
So obviously I'm not a prophet and no one knows, and I'm speaking to very high level officials around this area, and they're very, they're uncertain. They don't know. But we can definitely say that the plan in American level and in Israeli strategic level, the Prime Minister, Ron Dermer, and others, they want this to lead towards the end of the war. The plan here, and we need to go out of the small micro-tactical perspective on Gaza and look worldwide. What are the incentives of breaking this deal? The real game here is, and we always go back to there, America's interest in China. And in the midst of that investment in military power and diplomatic power, Trump needs peace and quiet in the Middle East and build alliances in the meantime. And there's one crazy, small, messy place called Gaza that messed up the Middle East. And it's an obstacle in realigning the world. So the real strategic effort here is to take out that obstacle to enable the new international alliance, we can even call it a new world order following the, let's say, liberal world order post-World War II that ended in 91 in Fukuyoma's end of history, and broke down in several in the past decades, and now Trump is trying to realign it and rebuild it. This is only putting aside a very significant obstacle to open. So the plan here is to put together Indonesia, Saudi Arabia, in with Israel, putting Turkey together, and let's say isolating the evil empires of Iran, Russia, and China together with North Korea, and allying all the others together. Hamas is an obstacle, and the goal here is to put them aside to enable a new world order.
If President Trump is looking to take the Gaza piece off the table in order to arrange a new world order, some of the quick fixes that look out of these 20 points, such as 3 terror states, Qatar, Turkey, and Egypt being part of this oversight command, the question is, at what cost do you think Israel is going to face because President Trump just wants to move it out of the way? We might be left with the problem.
Yes, so on a strategic level, in the Israeli perspective, I believe Hamas will stay in power in the Gaza Strip. It's unfortunate, it's wrong, it doesn't matter. In the broader perspective in this deal, Israel gains a lot. The Palestinian issue goes off the table mostly, even in Jeddah and Samaria. That means Saudi Arabia, Indonesia, Qatar, Turkey agreeing with Israel to not forcing Israel to start a Palestinian state in Jeddah and Samaria is a big success for Israel. It's not annexation yet of Jeddah and Samaria, but it is a great success. The price is still having this problem in the southeast that we're trying to contain it as much as possible, at least in the meantime. But the gain, on the other hand, is significant. So yes, Hamas will stay there. We will pay the price. We will need to militarily understand how to address it right. But in the strategic perspective, Israel potentially gains much more.
Amiad, we've sat here over the last year a few times, and we both have talked about that Hamas mustn't stay in charge of the Gaza Strip. And we've lost hundreds of soldiers' lives. We've spent 2 years fighting this. We've spent billions of dollars. Israel has faced major international condemnation, which I think is wrong, but that's what we faced. And now, if I hear you saying, you're saying Hamas is, from your analysis based on this plan, Hamas is going to stay in power in the Middle East. I know that's not your opinion of what you want, but that's where you see this plan. Is that acceptable?
Let's go out a little bit in the perspective. There's different layers of strategy. There is strategy and there's grand strategy. I'll give an example to explain the issue. You know, in the American Revolution, there are 2 empires involved in the American Revolution: the British Empire fighting against the young America rising up, and the French supported them. Strategically, militarily, on that war, the Brits lost the war, and the French won the war. On the strategic military level of that war. Grand strategy, I mean, if you look at the outcome long-term of the war, the French lost because they got in dramatic debt out of investing tons of money in that war. They lost strategically. And the UK, the United Kingdom, actually learned the lesson that they can't manage these settlements far away from the kingdom, and they actually built a very strong navy and changed their strategy to build a naval empire worldwide. So in the strategic level, militarily, Israel failed. I will say that. We discussed it here several times. The military elite of the state of Israel failed to bring the diplomatic level, the government, an asset to negotiate. They failed to destroy Hamas militarily. Netanyahu understood that disaster, military disaster, and tried to turn that into a grand strategy gain by letting Trump, in an opportunity that I think he and Ron Dermer struck together and built together, in taking advantage of understanding we cannot win this alone, the military failed, by only threatening the Gaza city by itself, what we should have done in November 23, challenging the city of Gaza, the core governance central of the Hamas regime, and threatening Qatar by attacking the Hamas people in Qatar, shoveling the entire chessboard and forcing them to negotiate. What happened in the past couple of months, shoveled everything and opened the negotiations. So I think these two moves, threatening Hamas in the Gaza City and threatening Qatar, opened a grand strategic opportunity to close international alliances, which will move Israel to a very, very good era now. Yes, we still have Hezbollah strengthening in the north. We still have a small Hamas. We still have military challenges. But in the grand strategic world, if we succeed to double our GDP in the next 10 years with some kind of a good alliance with Saudi Arabia, opening the Pacific Ocean to Israel through India and Saudi Arabia to the Middle East, and becoming a central gravity of the new world order, this is an opportunity for Israel.
Point number 9, if I'm not mistaken, in the Trump deal says, which is where we are now, says that Hamas has to demilitarize, and that's a condition of the deal. And the first point says that Gaza will no longer pose a threat against Israel and Hamas will not be running the Gaza Strip. If I understand what you're saying correctly, neither of those points are going to be enforced.
First of all, Hamas are declaring very clearly, we're not going to de-arm ourselves. We're not going to demilitarize the Gaza Strip. Number 2, this is important. There's 90, let's say even 100%, but it's not far from 100% support for the jihad Sunni ideology in the Gaza Strip. It manifests into some gangs, but mostly towards Hamas leadership. The people of Gaza support Hamas. There's no technocrat leadership in Gaza that will not have a jihadist world of ideas. It's like us enforcing our Western perspective on a political debate. They don't have a political debate. They believe in the jihad. The question inside there is tactically, should we prefer attacking now or waiting for the next generation? It's tactical questions in their perspective, when and how to destroy the state of Israel and to fight against the West. But they're all jihadi extremists. You will not find a Western, smart, intellectual, deep person that really believes that peace and quiet is the way to live. That is a fact. How America will implement its plan to demilitarize Hamas, there's one first principle in war. No one will fight your wars. The best example is the Second World War. We always say America won the Second World War against the Germans. It took America 2 years for the Senate to agree for FDR to help Churchill and UK to fight against Germany, Nazi Germany. 2 years, the UK was standing alone against Nazi Germany. No one will fight a war that is not enforced upon him in the Western world. No one will fight our wars. It's only on us. America will never disarm Hamas. Turkey will never disarm Hamas. Egypt will never. No one will disarm Hamas without Israel.
So if that's the case, doesn't it mean that ultimately speaking, Israel's going to need to take matters in its own hands?
Obviously, yes.
Isn't that day to day? Meaning if we are looking, I've spent hundreds of days on Gaza. You spent hundreds of days in the army this entire time and all of our borders. People have lost their lives. There's been a whole national push towards attacking Hamas. The reason, at least the reason that was presented to Israel that we were going for this deal was, first of all, to get the hostages home, which thank God they're home, but from the very beginning did not go hand in hand with military victory over Hamas. And second of all, were these guarantees by Trump. Just a couple days ago, Trump said, if you do not demilitarize, phase 2, you're going to be destroyed. We'll have to put boots back on the ground. If you right now are sitting in the driver's seat and I say, Amiad, how long will it take you to defeat Hamas? Pretend Trump hadn't come with a plan for 1 second, because I don't know if this plan's going to work and there may be opportunities. What would you do to defeat Hamas?
Today?
Yeah.
I think, first of all, verifying that the 55-60% of the Gaza Strip that the IDF controls is under our control. B, to verify, like what's happening in Lebanon today, that we have the legitimacy to attack any military rebuilding and restructuring in the Gaza Strip. Now, I'll just give you numbers. I'll state it. Hamas is still in the same military capabilities today as it was on October 7th. This is a harsh statement, but it's pretty accurate. They lost some technology, communications, but
their rockets are pretty much depleted.
Right. But practically, soldiers, munitions, weapons, funding, they have a very, very big international web of companies and money, way to fund themselves through companies and NGOs around the world. They're okay. We need to fight, first of all, drowning the swamp. In financially, we need to verify that they do not rebuild militarily in more than what they have today. Israel threw on Gaza approximately 100,000 tons of munitions, air bombs, most of it. 1%, assume, it's more than that, but assume 1% did not take. You know how much military level of explosives they have today, just collecting that? And they announced last week after the deal that they're collecting for the public safety all munitions found in the Gaza Strip. Now, that's tons of explosives in military grade. They learned a lot of lessons. They're smart people. They're strategic. They're fundamentalistic. They really believe in what they do. They will prepare for the next round. We need to verify they don't prepare enough. We need to work in intelligence, have human intelligence inside the Gaza Strip today, because the flaw of the Israeli intelligence towards Gaza would have zero human intelligence inside Gaza since 2018, 2019. So we should address that in the strategic military level. In the grand strategy, we need to verify that they're isolated internationally in what they do, which will be very hard to do.
Who in the Israeli government, Ben-Gvir, Smotrich, who right now is holding the position that if they do not demilitarize, because Prime Minister Netanyahu got an entire coalition to vote for this, and he has different parties, and it's also very hard for me to accept what you're saying. I understand that it might be a realistic analysis of the area, but who within the Israeli Knesset right now is going to say, if there is an opportunity, if they do not demilitarize, we do need to go back into fighting and we need to destroy Hamas? My anticipation was, if we got the bodies back of our hostages, and we still have the bodies of deceased hostages there, we remove the major obstacle to defeating Hamas. And if we didn't have that obstacle, I would assume it would take 3 to 4 months.
Militarily, today, in 3 to 4 months, continuing the operation of Kavod Gidon, the Chariots of Gideon, inside the Gaza city, in 3 to 4 months, as we discussed here, I think in August, till January, Hamas would have been over. But the price in international affairs today was higher, and we traded. Now, it's a big surprise that Hamas gave up all its assets. There was another side for that. They were trading and negotiation. There's another side for the negotiation which we cannot see, which I believe is the military pressure of the IDF on Gaza City, the attack in Qatar, and obviously some kind of promise that Hamas eventually, and they believed in that, even if it's not an official promise, will stay in power in some way. They would never give up such an asset like all the hostages without some kind of gain on the other side. And I believe that's practically what happened. Everyone is talking the talk that we will destroy Hamas. I don't see it happening tomorrow morning with American troops. I don't see it happening with Israeli troops tomorrow morning. Now, asking the political question, who is going to offer that? My question is, what practically they're going to offer? So Smotrich will come and say tomorrow morning, I want Hamas to be destroyed, and I'm going against you, Prime Minister Netanyahu, in the elections that are going to happen now. We're going to topple down the government and the coalition. We're going to go to elections, and my ticket in the election will be, I want to destroy Hamas. And Netanyahu will look at him and say, okay, and with what munitions are going to do that? With the American ones? That you're destroying Trump's peace deal in the Middle East now, and you're going against him in his face to dismantle Hamas, and you're going to give up the deal with Saudi Arabia. You're going to give up all the investments in AI in Israel and rebuilding the IDF with American goods and align now and so many things you're trading in the grand strategic level. I understand it's harsh. I apologize for being the realist in the room. But you need to be honest with our options. What are Smotrich's or Ben-Gvir's options to offer? It's like, booga booga, yes, let's fight, great. But we're now in a very complicated diplomatic grand strategic level, which unfortunately Bezalel Smotrich and Ben-Gvir do not even understand, in my perspective. Smotrich more than Ben-Gvir, definitely, but they're not in the game. Indonesia is a 280 million people state in the Far East. You know what a deal between Israel and Indonesia that will open the American market for them? That's a stand in front of China for America. There's so many calculations here that we don't even understand the game. It's like it's a five-dimension chessboard that we're trying to touch what we know that is above sea level, but there's under the sea level so many things happening, from trade to chips to intelligence to gas and oil, things that we do not see in this calculation. And my argument is that the Trump peace deal is a brilliant one in his perspective and the American interest, which is different than the Israeli one. And they're trying to achieve a new world order. It's something that happens once every century, not every 3 years.
If I look pre-deal, the reason Hamas, and you and I have spoken about this, the reason that Hamas came to the deal is for one reason. They did not see a future without the deal. I mean, they gave up their most important bargaining chip. And the reason they didn't give it a year ago, as you and I spoke about, is because a year ago, they still thought that they had what to gain in the Gaza Strip. I'm sure that there were deals made behind the scenes. I don't think it was to keep Hamas in power. Maybe you're correct. I'm thinking maybe it is to give some type of amnesty to the leadership in a foreign country that we don't know about. Something was promised them, otherwise they wouldn't have done it. But the movement over the past year, from a place where Hamas wasn't even at the table a year ago. People always say, why didn't you make this? If you made the deal today, you could have made it a year ago. Hamas wasn't interested. It was a one-sided deal. What brought them to the table is that the IDF transformed itself from an outdated army that was living in ivory tower. We recruited hundreds of thousands of reserve duty soldiers. Our kill ratio has been higher than most armies. We managed to fight in urban settings. I had John Spencer here a week ago who, according to all urban fighting, this will become possibly the archetype of how one needs to fight in an urban setting and underneath the ground. My feeling is that this army is ready today to finish the job. Now, I hear what you're saying, that our interests don't align with Trump's interests on all things, right? On some things they do. But my question is, if Gaza is what's left in order to achieve this regional deal, if you ask Israelis, another October 7th, is that worth another October 7th, which if Hamas rebuilds and technology continues and they're able to carry out more and more attacks, is that worth these regional alliances? For me, the answer is no, because I feel like it's one and the same. And I don't see Prime Minister Netanyahu getting elected. I think if he's running next, October, make it earlier, he's going to start running in June. Right, he'll start, or May, even earlier. All it's going to take is Yair Lapid, the head of the opposition, stand up and say, Prime Minister Netanyahu, we lost 2,000 people in this war. We lost 500 soldiers just fighting your war. And now look, Hamas is waving a flag. And Hamas will certainly wave the flag because they prefer Yair Lapid, who's going to play softball with them, than Netanyahu. I can't imagine, even in Prime Minister Netanyahu's short-term interests, that he would allow this to happen.
So I think you asked several questions. I will address the first one. Tactically, on a tactical level, the IDF fought a very good battle inside urban cities. I don't disagree with Colonel Spencer. Argument two, if we would have fought what we did in the Chariots of Gideon in October 8th, Hamas was dismantled even then. The fact that it took us a year and a half to start the Chariots of Gideon is a representation of all the assets we lost on the way. It's diplomatic time, it's munitions, it's exhaustion of the IDF, it's like many, many tactical problems that influence the strategic level. So yes, we can 3 months continue the battle, but the prices we paid in the past year and a half till we got the position where we are today are too high and unsustainable on the long term. Netanyahu had to force the IDF, kicking them what they were holding the table not to go forward with Chariots of Gideon. You need to understand that Netanyahu forced the IDF to fight. The current leadership, Herzi Halevi, and unfortunately Eyal Zamir too, have proven themselves as unwilling to fight the war.
The current and previous chief of staff.
Yes. Underneath that perspective, as I said, the tactical level, let's say two brigade officers are the most courageous tactical level commanding field officers that we have and the world has, and they're the best. That's the reason why we had some successes. They pushed the IDF from beneath to go to war. But the brigadier generals and the generals did not want to fight this war. It's unfortunate. It's sad. That is a fact. And it's on us to change that and to hire different generals, to educate different generals, and to offer a different perspective of how to rebuild the IDF. Your third question was, you think, if I remember the question right, is that you think that we should today give up the deal and destroy Hamas. And Netanyahu politically cannot do that, and he will not win the elections. And I will answer to that. He will win the elections. He will frame it as a victory. He will come with a Saudi president, with MBS maybe coming here to a peace deal. He will come with the Indonesian president to have a peace deal. He will come with Trump supporting, like he will have every international support, which is a strong argument. And he brought all the hostages back, or most of them back, a lot of them alive. So it's a storytelling question. Now, Yair Lapid's question, following your question, Yair Lapid asked to stop the war on October 10th. Like, he can never say, and that was a debate yesterday in the Knesset, Yair Lapid and the entire Israeli left were always for stopping the war and cutting a deal, leaving Hamas and taking care of them one day. That was the left position for the past 2 years. There's no real opposition for the Netanyahu strategy that gained a traumatic weakness of Hamas internationally and physically, with losing 50% of their territory and destruction of Gaza Strip and mostly Gaza City too. And it's some successes in that aspect. And Netanyahu could come with a lot of credits of what he did. Was it optimal? Was it the best solution? Definitely not. I criticized strategy from day one. But if you look at what our opportunities and options are today, I would definitely sign the deal, and Netanyahu will surf on the deal and the outcomes of the deal towards winning the next elections and being the next prime minister of Israel too.
So by kicking the Hamas can down the road and making large deals that he will bring major people to the table, you think Netanyahu will be able to sweep to victory?
Oh, yes, definitely. And there's no alternative. You need to understand, there is no alternative for Netanyahu's leadership today in Israel. Yair Lapid barely passes the threshold. Benny Gantz barely passes the threshold. Naftali Bennett, which American loves and the media loves, is despised on the Israeli right and is questioned in the Israeli left, and he's the only option that the left has. Gadi Eisenkot is not even
former chief of
staff is not even in the level of challenging Netanyahu. And in the right, there's no one challenging. Netanyahu is a single leader, not because that he did something. He's only the only capable, competent leader we have today as an option.
Amiad, I want to take us to a different level now. You've painted a harsh reality. Some of it I disagree with, as I've mentioned to you, and I still disagree and think we can change it, but that we'll have to see how these things play out over time. And I'm not sure of the assumption about President Trump. I know he has his own interest for a world order. I'm not sure he doesn't want a Gaza Riviera. And I think if Hamas is in charge, he's not going to have a Gaza Riviera. I think that those two, do you agree, those two things cannot go together? Hamas control Gaza Strip and a Trump Riviera plan.
Right.
Now, if we want to ask ourselves, how is the Arab world going to see Israel in 3 to 5 years of Hamas still standing, and we make all of these large agreements? What do you think?
I think the Arab world is complicated. So the countries we will sign deal with them, and we need to talk about Muslim worlds more than Arab countries. Muslim countries like Indonesia, they don't care about the Arabs. That's one thing. Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, Morocco, Dubai, Qatar put their aside. Their secular leadership with a population, especially Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Turkey, a population that is religious and that is Muslim and that is more and more supporting the Muslim Brotherhood. The Muslim Brotherhood as a threat is a threat to their regime too. And these leaderships of Saudi Arabia and let's say the secular Arab countries, they want to align with the West and to fight against the Muslim Brotherhood worldwide. They want to weaken the Muslim Brotherhood in Turkey. They want to weaken, and the way for Trump to do that is to embrace them towards the West. Now, there are many other calculations. The fact that Turkey is the only army in NATO today in Europe, it's another thing that Trump is trying to put them together. The fact that Hamas is standing still in Gaza is the question of the rest of the story. Are Israel supporting Saudi Arabia? Do they gain assets from being in international ties with us, with Trump? The question is, who's the next president after Trump, and what is his perspective? It's a J.D. Vance who's now visiting Israel. It's a challenge. J.D. Vance is an isolationist in international affairs, which will be a challenge. Marco Rubio is different. Marco Rubio understands the role of America as a central of a nation-state alliance that is different than a liberal order, that has to work together for trade and to fight against countries who counter that order and threaten it. These are things that are beyond the scope of the next 10 years. Israel, and again, going back to Israel, what Israel needs to do, Israel needs to verify that it's strong enough, relevant enough, to maintain and sustain these relationships, these deals with countries that have incentives. There's some chance that the Saudi king will fall for a Saudi Arabia rebellion, for a Muslim Brotherhood rebellion inside Saudi Arabia. These are things that can and happened already in the past and can happen in the Arab countries. We need to be very careful with our alliances. We need to work with, but not give up, our very strong military. We need to invest in building a strong army that can prevent wars.
And an independent military.
Independent military. With
the conference that you spoke at, that I was at last week, can you give our listeners and our viewers an insight into what it's going to take so that Israel is not this dependent on any world power? Because right now, from what you're saying, is even if Israel decides, from your perspective, to go against the Trump plan, and we'll lose diplomatic and this and that, you're saying that the ammunitions and everything that we're getting right now from the U.S. are essential and we can't fight without them. How do we decrease that, even on the United States, which is our greatest ally? How do we decrease that dependency over the next 10 years?
So the core thing we need to do is stop getting American funds and support for the military support from America.
It's stop taking the money.
Stop taking the money. It's important because we don't need charity. The Israeli GDP is expanding. It's already $600 billion. Its GDP per capita is close to 60,000 GDP per capita, which is very high.
Which means that the U.S. money, which they've generously been giving to Israel, is less than 1% of our GDP.
0.7%
yes. of our GDP. And yet, I think people think it's 30% of our GDP. Within the United States, that is the pushback from many people on the left and the right. So by removing that off the table, and Israel can survive without that. What would be, instead of the $4 billion, what would be the financial arrangement for the U.S.?
We're fighting American wars in the Middle East. We take for example, the attack in Iran. Israel did 95% of the job, and the ballerinas came with their B-2s. They can set a 747 throwing these big bombs. There was no air defense systems in Iran because thanks to the Israeli Air Force.
So Israel's doing the dirty work and the hard work for the U.S. Do they have another ally like this anywhere else in the world?
So they hope that Japan will be like that, and they hope that South Korea will be like that. Now, South Korea will sign tomorrow a deal with China, and Japan is building its own army for the first time in the past several years. There's no other country in the world that is self-sustainable militarily like Israel, any other ally in the world that is relevant for America.
So if you take that alliance, that Israel is going to be the United States friend in the Middle East. We share similar values, democracy. We want positive growth for people. We're not imperialistic, and we're their ally in the Middle East. How do we use that relationship to create independence?
So invest together in AI, in building new drone-based armies. It's the technological edge that Israel has needs to work together again as allies with the American military industry. We are in a position that we can even compete with them. The amount of weapons Israel is selling to Europe today is unbelievable. Now, it's a good thing for Israel. It's a good thing that we are competing. We need to translate it into diplomatic position, but it's in our hands to do that. That's the first step. The second step is obviously expanding our GDP. Israel has to be a very, very wealthy country. If Israel gets in the next 5, 7, 10 years to 100,000 GDP per capita, $100,000 GDP per capita, that is a dramatic move in Israeli economy, which we will be much stronger in the ability to invest, will open the gap and expand the gap between Israel and its enemies surrounding it. And a strong economy is a real difference. Now, regarding
Israel needs to be a wealthy country.
yes,
Wealth will lead to military success.
wealth, military success is part of a grand strategy of a strong nation. It gives us ability to have long wars. It gives us flexibility in many other leveraging negotiations. Europe is trying to BDS Israel and
Try to do boycott, divestment, and sanctions against
to
Israel.
boycott Israel militarily. They can't. They have to buy our weapons, and we're using that as leverage. Now we're letting them badmouth us, attack us publicly, but in secret rooms, they buy our weapons. We need to start leveraging our military industry towards diplomatic power. So we're not doing that enough. Gideon Sa'ar now, as a foreign minister, is starting to do that with Europe. Denmark just decided to not even check Israel's air defense systems and buy the French one. After they understood that the French will come only in a decade for very limited success capabilities, they came back to Israel and said, okay, we will have to buy yours.
Let's take Ireland. Ireland said that they were completely boycotting Israel. And within 2 weeks, on a small little area of the newspaper, it says, well, wait, they just changed their boycott. It's really not a full boycott on Israeli companies. Why? What are they buying?
Weapons.
They're buying weapons. And so Ireland
Spain
needs us to fight against
Right.
the Islamic jihadist takeover of the world.
Spain announced they're going to cancel a deal of $800 million from buying weapons from Israel. The prime minister announced that, and he asked the CEO of the company he was buying from, oh, I never heard about that, and it's not an option. So
Israeli mental might and the ability to create a strong economy here, Amiad, you're saying, is the key to Israel creating independence by using that for diplomatic.
yes, it's one of the keys. One of the keys. Financial, let's say an economic, unbelievable success and strength. It's unity. Now, this is something we need to work inside. We need to understand that we're together. The younger generation is much more united than it's presented on television and video. Now, I'm reaching here to the American.
Wait. Say the younger generation is much more united than this presented on television. Give me an example.
But we need to phrase it very accurately. When you consume Israeli English-speaking media side of JNS, that's Times of Israel, that's J-Post, that's Haaretz definitely, that's others, you feel like Israel is the divided country. That is a false premise. It's wrong. There are in the margins 10-15% of Israeli elite who are resentment. They have a lot of resentment against what's happening. But if you will see the election's outcome, there's 80% support in the Jewish public, and I'm putting aside the Arab for a second, for basically a conservative, strong, hawkish, free market Israel. And there are in the margins 20, maybe 30% of the Jewish elite that are against it in some ways, and it's a lot of personal resentment against Netanyahu.
But you're saying the vast majority, 80% of our country wants unity.
Yes.
So you've got wealth in order to create financial incentives, military power, military industry. You've got unity. What's the third?
The third is Israel has to create much more liberty. And this is important. And it's addressing the army. There's a very important book by Victor Davis Hanson called Carnage and Culture. And the main argument is free societies who go and draft to the army by consent and understanding and identifying with the national identity win wars. People who are forced to join the army don't win wars. And if you look at the IDF today, they don't force people to join the IDF. It's mandatory, but they give up people that don't really care and enforce people.
It's important to say that that's actually in the Torah. That's in the Bible.
Right. But
right. But let's just quote it. What is the statement in the Bible? If you're weak of heart,
if you're afraid and weak, you go home. Now, that's in Milchemet Reshut. Don't go inside this issue, but the Haredi issue is 25% of first graders are Haredi. We need to be liberal in a way, in a deep sense of liberty, that we need to convince them to want to join the army and not force them. There's a trade-off. if we want soldiers today, we might force them to join the IDF, but we will push them away from the unity through using government power to enforce them. But if we trade that a little bit and lower the pressure now and let them join by consent, by will, and identifying with the Israeli broader nationalism, it will happen eventually very fast, much faster than you imagine, because they are emotionally and nationally connected, but there's social boundaries that prevent that from happening in the meantime. So unity, wealth, and liberty in the deep sense of liberty, that people are aligned together towards prospering and working together for a real a divine goal, that is the way for Israel to win a war. And the second we build a society like that, which is possible, our international position will be stronger. We will trade much better with the world. We will not feel small, as the biblical phrase that we are like chagavim. How do you say that in English?
We're like cockroaches.
We're like cockroaches in our eyes as we see they think about us. It's like, it's a state of mind.
We're these little bugs in our own eyes.
Yes.
And they're giants.
And so we need to stop looking at ourselves like that. It's a very provincial perspective, which Israel has these flaws. And the day we respect ourselves, we will be, and I really believe in that, in 15, 20 years from now, with the right leadership of Israel, it's not an empire, but we will be a very important building block in the new, realistic, nation-state organized world order that will take the world for the next level. The last sentence on that, there's Angus Madison is an economist who researched the international GDP in the world history, and it has a hockey stick that starts in 1776. And if you look at the world today, we're in a position today that the world can dramatically change for the best with technology, with AI, with robotics, with a lot of things that the world is moving towards. And Israel can and should be a center of gravity of that hockey stick, moving dramatically and influencing that with ethics, with culture, with morality, countering all the anti-human cultures that is going around the world. If it's extreme Muslimhood, if it's extreme wokeism, if it's a lot of ideas, Israel can be a center of gravity and even the center of the new world order, but it's in our hands.
Amiad, we've gone on a journey now over the last close to an hour where we talked about the Trump deal. You gave your vision on what you feel is very realistic. And it's a harsh reality. You're not saying the things that everybody wants you to hear. And what I appreciate here is you've driven us now to a vision of where Israel needs to be so that this harsh reality won't repeat itself. So that next time, if this does play out the way you're saying, and I hope it doesn't, I hope Israel goes back into the battlefield. I hope we finish off Hamas. But if we don't, you're saying you've laid out very clearly a plan. I know you've dedicated your life to this with the Israel Liberty Center, which you are the CEO of, and you've really founded to create a new reality. And for that, I think I and the people listening to this podcast need to thank you. And I appreciate you bringing your insights and your realism to the True East podcast.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you.